Are we on? Yes. Okay, so Google Books as one. Anyone use Google Books before? Yes. Yes? Really fantastic. For just to get the sense of what is the field. So let's type here art. Artificial intelligence. Body. And see what will come up. So we have already a list of robots and art. That might be interesting. Yeah. You need to have a kind of a hunch. What will work and what wouldn't. Mechanical bodies, computational minds, immersive visual art, and the essence of spatiality. It could be interesting. It could be dry as a bone. You don't really know. But that's how you can start. And from that, sometimes you might be fortunate enough to get some of the text already scanned, and by reading through it quickly, you can get the sense if it's worth going and getting it out of the library. Normally with these books, you will only see a short preview, 2 or 3 pages. But that might be enough for you to know whether it's worth taking it out from the library. Some of these books, well, here we have Heidegger and Technological Essence. And that might be interesting because you read Heidegger, we thought about technology. So that could be kind of interesting, but you see, unfortunately, as you scroll down, the book is, no, actually, they have more and more. Yeah. But you might also come to the end of this scanned section, and then you probably need to take the book from the library. So that's one way you could be using the web. Another is, as I was telling you, is this website that used to be called R, that's now called 82.221.106.113. Yeah. In order to be able to really work in it, you need to be invited. Now already I think I sent invitations to you, to Abbas, and to Ruth, and you can also invite other people. Okay. Yeah. So if you want it, either email me or email one of the people who already have access. I mean, you can search without being registered, but if you want to download something, you need to be registered. And here, you know, philosophy and theory. Let's take another topic. Let's take something else. Hannah, do you have a topic in mind from your outline? Anyone has a topic in mind? No?
Fractal trauma.
Fractal trauma. Fractal. Well, I think you will probably need to do a search on fractals and a search on trauma. But if you look at the fractal, you get African fractals. That sounds interesting. I don't know what it is. Fractals, complexity and connectivity in Africa. That could be very interesting. The force of the virtue, Deleuze, Science and Philosophy. I don't know this book, but it sounds like something I would probably like to read. So you just see sometimes, oh well, here you have actually it's an edited book, and you can see here what are the different chapters. Stephen Shaviro, definitely very interesting. And Manuel de Landa. Yeah, so here's something you could begin with. And you said trauma as well, yeah? If you look at trauma, then there is colonial trauma, memory, war trauma. So that's how you. The interesting thing about what used to be called art is that it's a community of researchers which are like you, collecting materials on topics, and there are many discussions and there are collections as well. So you can see all the available collections. So someone already was assembling different books and putting them in categories. So there is a collection of books about cultural studies around Africa. There is a collection of books against democracy. There is a collection on Afrofuturism. There is a collection on, let's say if we go to T, for instance, on theory of fiction, or, you know, so, and here you can see how many texts there are. You can also start your own collection if you feel that there is something missing. So in that way, you become part of a community of scholars and researchers who are mostly postgraduate students like you, and that can be incredibly valuable because there are also discussions, and you can ask a question and you can get people's response. You might say, well, actually, I'm thinking about fractals at Roma. Anyone has any ideas? Also, there are some interesting groups on Facebook. For instance, there is a group. Yes.
Sorry, just before, I found this reference recently.
Yeah.
Called UbuWeb.
UbuWeb is good. Excellent. Yeah.
I thought it's a good art reference.
Yeah. Ubu.com. It's a fantastic site that it's an archive of artworks. So, for instance, Andrea Fraser. Do you know her? Andrea Fraser is a fantastic performance artist whose performance style is often a formal lecture. And in this lecture, she imitates some famous figures in the art. Do you know this piece? She imitates some very famous figures in the art world, including Tracy Emin, and Thomas Hirschholm and Francesco Clemente. So, and it is completely outstanding. Let's see a little bit of it.
I was going to prepare a kind of formal introduction for this evening, and I didn't have the time. And it's probably better that I couldn't, because, of course, these kinds of introductions are among the rituals of recognition and incorporation that so much of my work has been about. And there are times that I really wish that I could perform these rituals without distance and without reflection, because this is one of those times, because there are really so many people that I really want to thank. I find it really extraordinary and kind of difficult to believe that people would work so hard on my behalf, or on behalf of an exhibition like this. The staff here, the Kunstverein, Karina Koch, and Janneke de Vries were just amazing, and the preparator, Robert, and his crew, and especially, of course, the director, Yilmaz Giulio, who gave me almost everything I asked for. I kept expecting him to say, no, we can't do that, that's impossible. And he basically never said it. And many other people who have made the work in this exhibition possible, some of whom are here this evening. So, I want to say thank you very, very sincerely. And to all of you for being here, especially my mother, who came all the way from California. be difficult to imagine what a critical art practice could be at the beginning of the new millennium. One factor in the demise of radical practice may be art's own collaboration with the forces of spectacle culture. If visibility has become art's primary horizon of aspiration, then for any radical aesthetic practice to be historically convincing, it must now define itself in opposition to that culture. Tonight, we are considering an artist whose project meets this criterion. An artist whose interventions invite the viewer to recognize the fundamental conditions of art and its inability to resolve its contradictions as a radical contestation of the hegemonic ordering of experience. His practice demonstrates that the desire to commemorate, which he inscribes as a grotesque echo of the fate of radical critique, is itself inextricably bound up with forms of culturally engineered adulation operating at the very center of artistic production and reception. He thus inverts and counters all of the artistic fallacies that hindsight and history have made evident. Indeed, it would be difficult to conceive of any practice that could surpass his as a synthesis of the most complex and radical artistic projects of the recent past, as well as the early 20th century. And it is a great pleasure to have him here this evening. Thank you. I don't want to sound coquettish. I mean, this could easily come off the wrong way. But you know, as an artist, I'm always disappointed. Even though I say the end result is important, I'm never satisfied. But I guess that's why I keep trying. You know, as an artist, I try to create an autonomous space in which a critical position can be made clear. You know, people come to see my work, maybe they're going to spend time. I hope I can make people feel involved, you know, but it's not about interactivity. I give something to people, but I don't expect communication. I want to make people think, but I don't want to be didactic, you know, I don't want to make political art. I don't want to intimidate or exclude people. I want to implicate people in my work, I mean in the world, you know, that's my political statement. What's important is not what people see in my work, it's what they see when they confront reality again. I work in reality. So why am I an artist? I guess I'm an artist because I take a critical position toward the world. You know, it's not about hope. It's about showing my disgust for the dominant discourse. How much information can you receive from one artist in a few minutes? Usually when an artist talks about his work, it lessens the allure. But that's hardly the case in this case. His friendly bombardment is really an art experience in itself. The simultaneity of thoughts passing through the brain is never easy to capture, especially if the brain in question is brilliantly hyperactive.
Okay, we can stop it there. But this is a fantastic performance. You really have to watch it till the end because in the second half something happens. I'm not going to tell you what, but if you watch it, you will see. What is really interesting is how this genre, how Andrea Fraser makes the art world her art. Yeah, how she takes this sort of speech that artists or curators normally give at the opening and makes that the material of her art, and how we can never tell. She begins by giving these normal thank yous, and we don't really know if she thanks the real audience for listening to her, or if it is already, or she already comments on the bullshit of the art world. There is another performance here by Andrea Fraser on Ubu, where she's in the Bilbao Museum and she has this headphone, the Guggenheim in Bilbao. She has these headphones that describe the building, and she's sort of kind of really using the descriptions as instructions for behavior. It's really powerful. So I also think it's something that you, specifically the work of Andrea Fraser, it's something that quite few of you could really explore in relation to your own practice. It's interesting the way she takes the kind of the lecture or the address or the crit and makes that the work. Yeah.
You know, she has this kind of version of characters.
Yeah.
Is that kind of similar?
Well, yes, of course you can say that. Of course it's similar. But it's not because, well, yes, of course it's a simulacrum, but I think that is just somehow one dimension.
Yeah.
In a sense, I think what she's sort of really commenting on the bullshit that surrounds art making, you know, and sort of the egos and the personalities and the money and the sense of authority and establishment that it involves. Yeah, and yet she's doing it as an artwork, which is a very interesting position. Yeah, you often, if you, let's say, read the comments in The Guardian after every sort of gallery or exhibition review or artist review, there will be comments that say, oh God, this contemporary art, we don't even know how to paint and what is it. And that kind of always feels a bit stupid. But here, the comment about art is itself a work of art. That's what makes it interesting. So, thank you very much for mentioning Ubu as a resource. It is really brilliant. UBU, Ubu Web. It can be very inspiring, but it is by artists, not by topics. So I think you will find it difficult to just put in a term and see what comes up. But the advantage of working in our library is that the librarians are incredibly knowledgeable and they help generations of students. So you can use their expertise. And the advantage of working in the British Library is that they have, once you understand how the catalog works, you have incredibly powerful tools at your disposal. Just then you might find some, you know, obscure article in a journal that was published in the 60s that just deals with something that is interesting for you, you know. But what you really need to do for next week is to start working on your taste buds. What is interesting, what is not interesting, what you want to follow and what not. There is no right or wrong. It's not like you need to read everything. Only read what looks to you exciting. Only follow your interests. Yeah, it should never be a punishment because you are developing your practice. So if you come across something that looks boring and maybe important but kind of not interesting, I think you need to think twice whether you want to spend your time doing it. It's much better to find something that is.
I saw mixtures of 5 different quotes from different.
Yes, yeah, at a minimum 5 different quotes and 5 different artists or artworks. Okay, so you will have a kind of portfolio or like a file with these materials. Now, what is a quote? It's a few sentences from a book that is relevant to the topic. It needs to be properly referenced. It means it needs to have the name of the author, the name of the book, the name of the publisher, the place of publication, the year of publication, and if it was originally in a foreign language, in a non-English language, there was also the name of the translator. Now here is an example. Here is a book. So you take this information not from the cover of the book. It's very important to learn. These are kind of key academic skills for postgraduate students. You don't take this information from the front cover of the book. You go to this page. Yeah, you copy it from here. Now, the referencing we use in CSM is called the Harvard referencing style. there are three popular styles, well, two popular styles in kind of humanities academic writing, Harvard and Chicago. If you are used to Chicago and that's what you want to continue using, I have no problem with that, as long as you are consistent. The general, the standard format for in Central St. Martin's is Harvard. I used to be very much in favor of Chicago because it has footnotes, and Harvard doesn't really use footnotes. It just uses endnotes. But to be honest, it doesn't really matter. Use whatever you want, but be consistent. And you can get in the library a leaflet on how to reference. There are also referencing tools online. You don't really need them because you're not going to have tons and tons of references. But learn to, if you find a quotation that you're going to use, then you need to have the book, the author, the page number, the publisher, all this detail, and everything has to be copied into your file. So 5 or 6 quotations relevant, 5 or 6 articles. That's just the task for next week. Okay? Good. Now, we are moving on. Any questions? So, we spent 3 weeks looking at simulacra, and I think so what is simulacra? I'm asking you. What is simulacra or simulacrum? What is it? Simulacrum is singular, simulacra is plural. Like medium, singular, media, plural. There is no such thing as medias. Yeah? Because these are words with a Latin ending. Yeah? So simulacrum, singular, simulacra, plural. So what is simulacrum or simulacra?
Proliferation that repeats in the text.
Very good. Wow.
A copy of a copy when the original is not relevant.
Good. Good, but be careful. When you say a copy of a copy,
Or a copy.
it might imply that there is an original. So you see, we spoke about, that's good. We spoke about two versions of simulacra. That's what Brian Massumi was explaining in his essay, Realer Than Real. He was saying, there is the notion of simulacra that people generally take from Baudrillard. Baudrillard is a very well-known French theorist that wrote in the 70s and 80s, and he has books about simulacra. And normally when people talk about simulacra, they think about Baudrillard in this context. He was a kind of theorist of the media. And his idea of simulacra, that's the one that Massumi and Deleuze criticize, is that simulacra is a copy of a copy of a copy. So in Baudrillard's notion, there is a real world. The real world was gradually represented in pictures. And then these pictures were gradually photographed. So the photograph, or like a hyper-realistic painting, is a copy of a copy. Yeah, you remember we spoke about that. So we live in a world in which images don't relate to the real anymore, but relate to other images. So we are surrounded with images like virtual reality images that copy photographic. For instance, downstairs in the art and science degree show, there was a virtual reality installation. I don't know if you had a chance to put the headset on, that took you into space and you kind of saw the sun and everything. Now, you might say this virtual reality experience is based on NASA photographs. No, it's not that. It's not based on the space as it really is, but on the NASA photographs of space. So virtual reality is a copy of a copy. Yeah? So
sorry.
Yes?
That's the question. Can we say that Matrix is a simulacra?
Matrix as a movie.
Yeah.
of course, yes. But wait a second. The point is that this notion of simulacra as a copy of a copy of a copy, that still in the end or in the beginning there is some real that this is a copy of. This is the approach. That's a kind of a popular approach to simulacra, which I was trying to move you away from. That's not the approach that Deleuze and Massumi are employing, because they're saying, well, they're saying it's not really helpful if you are coming to think about art. And also, the problem with this approach is that, so Baudrillard comes and says, believe me when I tell you that the images around you are simulacra. But then you kind of have to ask, but Mr. Baudrillard, are you simulacra? Why should we believe you? If you're telling us that all the images are lying, why should we believe you? From what position can you come and tell us that all images are a copy of a copy of a copy? As Massumi is explaining, there is a much more interesting way to deal with simulacra. That's the way that Deleuze proposes, in which simulacra is not a copy of a copy of a copy. It's a completely different way of thinking about images. Not as, yes? Exactly. It's very good. It emphasizes difference, not similarity. It's a very, very good. Spot on. It emphasizes the notion that, so some images are copies of the real, and even if they are copies of the copy, there is some kind of real in the end. There is some kind of real gold that all the paper money relate to. That's the notion of simulacra that Baudrillard is proposing. But what Massumi and Deleuze are saying is that there is completely different kind of images. There is a different way of making images that is not based on the notion of the copy at all. It's just based on an image as different, as simply being different. Not a copy of something, but different from. Like all these versions of the Mona Lisa. Let's look at it again. I know you probably see that. Just I cannot think of any other image. So these are not copies of an original, but they just differ from each other. And so there is another way of thinking about images, not as copies, but as exercises in difference. Simulacra is not trying to imitate anything, is not trying to make something similar to something real. An image that is a simulacra or simulacra is just another real. You might say that simulacra suggests that there is nothing real that later gets copied. There's only images. And all there is, all there ever was, and all there ever gonna be is images. In that context, it is quite interesting, a slight digression from Lyotard, but actually it's very important. Now there is a book by Bergson, Henry, Matter and Memory. I don't know if I have it here.
Can I ask something?
Of course. No.
So if simulacra is a copy without no resemblance, then why are resemblances between the Mona Lisa that we have just seen and the actual painting?
But is it resemblance or is it difference?
Well, they look the same, but they are not the original.
Well, it's a little bit like here. Let's look at just this. Do you know this image?
Yeah.
Yeah? Okay, so are they similar or are they different?
Both.
Exactly. So why do we always privilege similarity? Why do we always automatically go to the similar? Where is the difference? Where is the right of the different? Can we put the different on equal footing to the similar? You look at twins in a pram. Are you going to say, oh, they're so similar, so pretty? Or are you going to say, oh, they're so different? So you see, it becomes a political question. It becomes a question of our politics. Why we think that why identity jumps into our consciousness faster than difference? Because as you say, these are both similar and different. Yeah? So we can look at the Mona Lisa not in terms of how they are similar to each other and how some are more, let's say, you might say, oh, this is a very corrupt copy of a Mona Lisa. Say, but this is a very accurate copy. But this is a copy of a copy of a copy. This is a simulacra. This is and this is a terrible simulacra. This is a copy of a copy of a copy of a copy of a copy. You know, and it's self-referential to boot. It's really terrible. And this barely has any visual resemblance to the Mona Lisa, but still uses some of it. Yeah. So it's, instead of all the time referring to some kind of original as a sort of the absolute value, everything has to be arranged in relation to, you might say, what we have here is an explosion of different versions.
Last week when we talked about it, you mentioned that the atomic vertical logic, idea, object, image, and then if the simulacra is successful in proliferation horizontally, it goes so wide that it kind of makes this logic less relevant.
Yeah, because it puts the logic of difference, the horizontal logic of difference, on equal footing to the logic of identity. Yeah. So, and I want you to understand that this is not simply a kind of an exercise in aesthetics. It also has political significance, because do you want to live in a society where to be similar, to be identical, to be like everyone else is held as a high value? Or you want to live in a society that respects difference, that allows you to be different without excluding you, without locking you in a mental asylum or in a concentration camp? Yeah? So it immediately becomes a question of politics, because if identity is automatically our greatest value, if we look at Diane Arbus and say, oh, they're identical twins, then we imperceptibly approve of a political system that makes the different outside, not belong, locks the different out. Yeah? Does it make sense? So with the Mona Lisa, you might say, what makes them, instead of trying to arrange them on a sort of pyramid with the original Mona Lisa at the top, remember this from the beginning of the year? So you might say, this is the Mona Lisa, the original one in the Louvre, and all of these are copies. Let me get this a little bigger. And all of these are copies. As you zoom in, you see that the whole body of the king is made of little people who look up at him. So you could arrange the Mona Lisa in that order, with the original oil painting in the top and all the copies sort of forming its body. That will be one way of thinking about it. But immediately you can notice how hierarchical it is. It puts the original as the key, as the arbiter. It gives the original the ultimate authority over what Mona Lisa should look like. Mona Lisa should look like the one in the Louvre. And the more you deviate from this original, the less of a Mona Lisa you are. Yeah? That's one approach. The other is that we have here not different copies, but just difference. And a horizontal spread of differences. Each one then is not measured according to how different it is or how similar it is to the original, but simply as another copy or another version or another expression. Yeah, that removes the notion of hierarchy. So yes, they're all Mona Lisas, but each one is different. Each one is a variant. And it's not a question of which one is better and which one is worse. The question is, how come there are so many different ones? What makes it possible to have such an explosion of difference? And that also suggests that the one in the Louvre is just another version. It's just another simulacrum. It's not, it doesn't have any authority over the others. It's not any more original. It's just another version. Okay? Does it help?
So does the simulacra distort time, or kind of?
Simulacra, okay, it's true that with simulacra we talk about a different notion of time. Not a linear time, but a kind of a time as a recurrent time. But I think we will leave that for now. We're going to talk about time in a while. Now, I think there's probably still a question that you might be asking, well, how actually this notion of simulacra, how is it helpful in my practice? Well, for one way it can, let's say, help your practice is that, well, as you were saying earlier, Abbas, by looking at Andrea Fraser's performance, you might say, well, is she making sort of caricatures of all these art people? Is she making copies of them? That would be one way. Another would be that she's generating a sort of a series of impressions. And the series is not suggesting that these are caricatures or copies or imitations, but just a difference, an argument for difference. You might also start thinking, for instance, about the way you can use repetition in your work. How just by taking something and repeating it, something happens, something starts to happen. Think about Susanna's wall of these small metal pieces, and how different it would be if there was just one. We spoke about it in the Crete a couple of weeks ago. If there was just one, we would read it in terms of what it means. But when there is this explosion of different ones, which are also a little bit similar, like the Mona Lisa, then we realize that there is something else there. We're not only reading individual pieces in terms of what they mean, we also start to think about repetition and process and making, and how they are different from each other, and how this difference is not visible, not really tangible, but at the same time completely present, like a sound. So difference perhaps is something you can hear rather than see, because it's a rhythm. Difference is a rhythm. Okay, so you know what? I think it's going to be a little bit clearer, or maybe a little bit more muddy, as we move to Lyotard. Okay, so Jean-François Lyotard wrote this book, Libidinal Economy, in the early 1970s, 1973, I think it was published for the first time. 1974, it was published for the first time. So who is Jean-François Lyotard? Anyone knows? Anyone heard his name before? Well,
Bitcoins and the term postmodernism.
Exactly, yeah. The one book that most people know from Lyotard is this little book, The Postmodern Condition, a report on knowledge, that Lyotard wrote at the request of the Canadian government that asked him to comment on the technological changes that happened, because it was in the time when first computing systems started to happen, first computer networks, and the Canadian government, being quite forward-looking, asked a philosopher to think about what it means for knowledge. So Lyotard wrote this little book that people often read in media studies departments, in even technology departments. He essentially coined the term postmodernism. You might say Lyotard invented postmodernism, or at least he gave it a name. It's a great little book. It's very popular and very familiar to many, but that's not what we're going to read. We're going to read his earlier work, Libidinal Economy, because I think it is much more provocative and much more directly relevant to your practice as artists. So, before we jump in, I want to just think about the title for a second. Libidinal economy, what do you think it means? Two words, libidinal and economy. What is libido? Desire. Libido, you said desire? Yeah. What is the libido? Is desire. Yeah? It's sexual desire. Sexual desire is the libido. It's a term that Freud uses a lot. Yeah? Okay. So, and what is economy? What is economy? What does it mean to be an economist? What economy? What economists do? It's a difficult question. What economists do? Finance, exactly. So economists, imagine someone sitting with a spreadsheet calculating interest rates. Economists in the Bank of England might come and say, well, we're going to raise the interest rate by 40% because, you know. So economists deal with finance, they deal with numbers, they deal, that quite, you would imagine someone quite boring, with the eye for detail, with a calculator, with an Excel sheet, probably a briefcase. Yeah? Okay, that's economy. Now, Marx famously was a political economist. So his great book, Das Kapital, The Capital, is a book about economics. So Marx taught to understand the political situation in terms of economics. Yeah? So, or you know, the famous saying by whom? Who said, it's the economy stupid? Clinton. Clinton, yeah? So, the American president. It's the economy stupid. What makes what is politics? What makes a country succeed or fail? What is the most important part of politics? It's the economy stupid. If you get the economy right, you get everything else right. If the economy is not right, nothing going to work. You're not going to have education, you're not going to have police, army, medicine. It's the economy stupid. So economy is to do with politics, to do with governance, to do with finance. Okay, back to the libido. Libidinal is to do with desire, is to do with sex, is to do with love. How these two things fit together? Do they fit together? How would you explain them in one? How would you explain this libidinal economy? What does it mean?
What the libido bring the economy?
What the libido brings to the economy?
Yeah.
Great. And the other way around?
Yeah.
What the economy brings to the libido? That's about it. Yes. But what I also want you to understand is these two terms, they don't belong together. They like oil and water. You know, you put oil and water together and they're separate, or like if you have two magnets, minus and minus, you try to put them together and they pull apart. They just don't belong. So what happens if you take two words that repel each other and put them together? How do we call something like this?
Paradox.
Very good. Paradox.
You see, for me, it kind of makes sense because economy is about exchange.
Yes.
And art,
very good.
Art is like exchanging of desire or libido.
Very good. Okay. Yes, it does make sense. And of course, paradox does make sense. But also notice that the title of the book, and we didn't get to the book yet at all. We just speak about the title. The title already manifests to us. I am going to deal with the paradox. Yeah, the book is about something paradoxical. Now, how that connects to the question of simulacra? Here's a cut of pigeons. How it connects to the question of the Mona Lisa? Does it connect, or is it too soon? Is that a paradox? It is a kind of paradox. Great, yes, I'm glad you can see it, because the normal way of looking at the Mona Lisa is whether you encounter it on a tea towel, on a fridge magnet, on a candy box, or in an art book, it always refers to the original. Every instance of the Mona Lisa is a copy of the original. Original, copy. The formula for that is A equal A. Original, copy. Original Mona Lisa, copy Mona Lisa. It doesn't matter where the copy is, this formula governs the relationship of each and every instance when you encounter the image. Okay, now suddenly we have something else, because here it seems that the logic of the original copy doesn't apply. What we have is one and another and another and another and another and another and yet some more. And so what is it? Is it a copy? Is it original? Is it a pastiche? Is it a irony? And what is that? Is it just a very bad copy? Or is it not as good copy as this one? Well, what about this one? What about this? All of these are we just saying that all of these are copies? Or there is a different logic? So what Deleuze was saying in his essay of the simulacra, and what we will see later is arguing in a different way, is that there is a different logic here. And if you want to understand modernity and modern technology, and that's what his report on knowledge, the postmodern condition, is also exploring, you need a different logic. Because the old logic of the original and copy, if you're only going to use that, you're going to miss out what is actually happening in the age of advanced technology, when images get produced and reproduced and disseminated at such speed and in so many different ways that the traditional model-copy relationship is just not sufficient to make sense of it. Something new is taking place. Something new technology creates new forms of understanding, and it requires us to start thinking in a different way. So the question is, are you up to the challenge? Can you learn to think in a different way? What you see in this space, in the degree show, is how this thinking in a different way is actually producing work. That's what it's all about. So what is this thinking in a different way? When we go to the title of the book, the title of the book is already suggesting to us what is required of us to learn how to survive in this new environment. What we need to be comfortable with, what we need to make friends with. we need to understand that we should not be afraid of the paradox. How I stopped to be afraid of the paradox and learned to love contemporary art. That will be the title of my next book. So, the title of the book is already paradoxical. What is a paradox, by the way? What paradox actually means? Anyone knows? It made of two words.
What goes against the usual way of thinking? Or
Very good, yes. Para means beyond, paranormal, beyond normal. So let's say ghosts, spirits, the occult is paranormal. Para is beyond. What is doxa? Doxa, yes.
Opinion?
Oh, doxa is
common sense?
common knowledge. Yeah, is what everyone knows, is the things as they are, is common sense. Paradoxa is beyond common sense, beyond the normal. Okay? So, that's what being paradoxical means. It means beyond common sense. So nothing to be scared of. For 2,000 years, logicians were trying to build systems of logic that exclude paradox, that are completely logical and make perfect sense. And guess what? They failed. They failed because in the beginning of the 20th century, even mathematicians realized that it's impossible to have mathematics or even arithmetics without paradoxes. Even in mathematics, there are paradoxes, and we can speak about it a little bit more, but I don't want to take your time now. Even such logicians as Bertrand Russell, the great British logician who wrote this book, Principia Mathematica, the principles of mathematics, even he realized that every logical system necessarily will include things that are outside, that it's impossible to avoid paradoxes. And then we have quantum physics, where the normal rules of logic completely don't seem to apply, as in Schrodinger's cat, which we discussed when we looked at Karen Barat. Okay, so the paradox is here to stay with us. And the question is, how can we harness the power of the paradox in your practice as artists? Well, you're already doing it. We're just going to see what Lyotard has to say about it. So libidinal economy, libido is desire. So what might be suggested here is that desire has its own economy. Desire has its own logic. Now, what does it mean? Does it mean that you need to have an Excel sheet for the, about, why you love a specific person and why you should now have sex? That might mean that. But it also might mean that there is a logic to desire. Desire has its own logic, which is not the analytical logic of mathematics. But desire is not complete chaos. It also means that economy, which is politics, which is governance, which is order, economy is also not driven by pure calculation, but also driven by passions. Yeah? Look what is happening right now in Italy. For the last couple of days, the international investment markets are down, if you are following this kind of thing. They are down because of the political turmoil in Italy, because the so-called populist parties threatened to come together and ultimately to take Italy out of the EU. And that is a big threat to global economy, and the investment markets are down. Investors are very scared of what is going to happen. But do you think, why do you think this is happening? Why the markets are now shaking and people are saying we might have another recession now? Well, in the end of the day, or at some point in this chain of events, people just felt that they want something different. And they voted for parties that offered something different. And they voted for it because of some kind of libidinal energy, of some kind of desire. They desired something. So you see, politics and passion, politics and calculation and desire are not separate, Lyotard saying. If you want to understand how politics work, you need to understand how desire works. That is the lesson. If you want to understand why people vote for Trump, or why people vote for the populist parties in Italy, or why people vote for Brexit or against Brexit, it's not enough to explain the rational steps people have to follow to arrive at a certain conclusion. It will never explain why politics happen. What you need to understand is how desire drives people to vote this way or the other. Yeah? In a sense, you need to understand how manipulating people's desire creates politics. That's libidinal economy. Okay, so do you want to break? Are we ready? Yeah. Is everyone here? Where is everyone?
So I'm still wondering. But I still do have some salary.
Yeah.
So that's not paradox. Yeah, it's like on one side, some money and salaries.
Okay.
You can do that later, maybe.
So.
You have already.
Are you ready? Do you have the text on your devices? You see it on the board? Okay. So, so let's just have a little taste of what Lyotard has to offer. I asked you to read it because I think it has direct relevance to making art. That's really the main reason I wanted to read a little bit of Lyotard and to see how it can speak to you about your practice. That's what I really want to explore for the next hour and a half. So, is everyone here? A. Okay, you came just in time. Excellent. Okay, so who feels like reading today? Who feels like reading? Aloud, with feeling. Abbas, I think it will have to be you. Are you ready? Okay, so we start. We will go later to the. We'll go later to his. What it's called? Not a lexicon. A glossary. But before, we're just going to. This is how this book, this incredible book, Libidinal Economy. Now, as we said already, the title is a paradox. The paradox is there on the cover. It kind of says, if you want to do philosophy, if you want to make art in this contemporary world, you need to understand the paradox. You need to get away from things that make sense. You need to become comfortable with things that don't make sense. You need to become comfortable with things that make sense in a different way. You need to become comfortable with a libidinal economy, not a political economy. Everyone knows political economy. Not a political economy, a libidinal economy. Maybe we can say an art economy. Art has its own economy. The artwork has its own logic. And if you try to understand an artwork with the normal logic, original copy, you're not going to understand what this explosion of Mona Lisas is about. You need a different tool. And this tool has something to do with the libido, has something to do with economy, and it is a paradox. Chapter 1, the great ephemeral scheme. What is ephemeral?
That is going to disappear.
Something temporary. Something is going to disappear. Something which is both present and absent. A little transient. Do you understand ephemeral? What about you, Madison? How do you understand ephemeral? What is it? Give me an example of something ephemeral. Very good. Wow. The rainbow. Yeah? Another example of something ephemeral.
Performance.
Why?
Because it's durational.
Because it's durational. You finish, it's gone. Excellent. Anything else? Anything to do with, let's say, the internet or the network is ephemeral? Like what?
Instagram story.
Lovely. That's great. You're getting it. That is ephemeral. Now, the great ephemeral scheme. Now, you see how the same paradox, libidinal economy, is making its appearance here. Ephemeral scheme. What is scheme? What does it mean to have a scheme? Do you have a thin skin? Do you have a sensitive skin? Do you have allergic reaction to things on your skin? If you touch things you don't like, does your body respond in this kind of, a rush? So what is the skin? What is a skin? How do you understand skin?
Cover.
A cover, okay. What else?
It's kind of protection.
Protection.
Shield.
Shield. It's a boundary, isn't it? Yeah? So think about your skin. What does it do? Do you remember we once spoke about the inside and the outside? And I told you that while we talk about it now, that's really not the right way to think about it. So the skin seems to be this boundary between the inside and the outside. Everything inside my skin is me. Everything outside my skin is not me. Yeah? So as long as the things outside my skin don't touch me directly, I'm okay. Is that true or false? No. True or false?
False.
False, yeah. Why? Why?
You breathe in gas.
Exactly, yes. Because, and yet, there is something about the skin that really draws a boundary between my inside and the outside. Yeah? So do you understand the skin? Think about the skin also as, let's say, the eardrum. Yeah? Something that receives vibrations and translates them to sounds. Think about skin as how do you touch someone? How do you receive pleasure in caressing, in being caressed, in being hugged? It's all through the skin. Yes, so the skin is not only the boundary, it's also a sensory organ. Yeah? So, you know that there is a lot of pleasure and pain that can go through the skin. Right. So, but also, what does it mean to skin a website? What does it mean to skin a WordPress blog? There is another meaning to skin. What does it mean to skin something online? To give it an appearance. Yeah.
Layout?
Exactly, yeah. So many designers who work with WordPress prepare custom skins for a website. So you might use exactly the same engine like everyone else, but you ask a designer to give you a unique skin. So think about the skin also as an appearance online. Yeah? Right. So, and Lyotard is telling us in the title that the skin is two things. It is great and it is ephemeral. So it is sometimes here and sometimes not here. It is transient. It is about to disappear, and yet it is great. How can something be great and transient at the same time? How can it be both? So how can something be both great and transient? It can be if it is allowed to be what? A paradox. Exactly, exactly right. Yeah. This is again the paradox. How can something be transient, which means disappearing, and great? Because great suggests what? Big, solid, permanent. Yeah? Okay. Now, thus, so can I ask you, this is a philosophy text to cherish. I would like to ask you to read it as you would read a witness statement in court. Or let's say, as this is your defense speech, you know, this is your last chance. And start from the title.
The great ephemeral skin, opening the libidinal surface. Open the so-called body and spread out all its surfaces. Not only the skin with each of its folds, wrinkles, scars, with its great velvety planes, and contiguous to that, the scalp and its mane of hair, the tender pubic fur, nipples, nails, hard, transparent skin under the heel, the light frills of the eyelids, set with lashes, but open and spread, expose the labia majora, so also the labia minora with their blue network bathed in mucus. Dilate the diaphragm of the anal sphincter, longitudinally cut and flatten out the black conduit of the rectum, then the colon, then the cacum. Now a ribbon with its surface all striated and polluted with shit, as though your dressmaker's scissors were opening the leg of an old pair of trousers. Go on, expose the small intestine's alleged interior, the jejunum, the ileum, the duodenum, or else at the other end, undo the mouth at its corners, pull out the tongue at its most distant roots and split it, spread out the bat's wings of the palate and its damp basements, open the trachea and make it the skeleton of a boat under construction. Armed with scalpels and tweezers, dismantle and lay out the bundles and bodies of the encephalon, and then the whole network of veins and arteries, intact, on an immense mattress, and then the lymphatic network, and the fine bony pieces of the wrist, the ankle. Take them apart and put them end to end with all the layers of nerve tissue which surround the aqueous humerus, and the cavernous body of the penis, and extract the great muscles, the great dorsal nets, spread them out like smooth, sleeping dolphins. Work as the sun does when you're sunbathing or taking grass.
Okay, let's stop here for a second. So what do you think? What do you hear in reading this text?
Very graphic.
Good, it's very graphic. What else is happening here? What is it about? What do you think is, what is actually is being described?
Section.
Dissection. Yeah. A kind, so what opened the so-called body? Why so-called? Why the so-called body? Okay, we'll come back to this question. So you open the body, and then what happens? Then what you do? You spread out its surfaces. Yeah? You start pulling it apart. You start pulling the body apart. Now, never mind that it's kind of a gruesome image. Don't worry about the gruesomeness of it. Just think about what actually happens. If you don't want to think about the body, think about the Mona Lisa. You take the Mona Lisa and you start spreading it. You start pulling it apart. And as you pull it apart, you get all these different versions that we saw so many times. You get all these different instances. Now let's go back to the body. You start pulling the body. So you start by, let's say, cutting the from the belly up to the throat, and then you pull the skin. And what is under the skin? There is mucus, there are veins, there are muscles, and you start pulling it all apart. And you pull it, and you pull it, and you pull it, and there's loads of this stuff inside the body, and you pull it apart, yeah? So what is happening as you pull it? What is the process here? The great ephemeral skin. What is under the skin? What is under the skin? Let's say, okay, this is my skin, right? So my skin is, as you said, what is it? What is it? It's a boundary. My skin is a boundary. But now you peeled off my skin. Underneath there are muscles, let's say, or veins, or mucus, or intestines. Okay, so what are they now? Well, but why a copy? It's a boundary, yeah. So after you pulled off the skin of my body, you remove the boundary, but what is underneath? Another boundary. And as you remove this second boundary, what do you find underneath? Another boundary. And guess what? It's boundaries all the way down. So you see, it's a bit like what you asked earlier about the Mona Lisa. How come they're all so similar? Yes, you can look at it like this. You can look at the skin as a boundary between the inside and the outside, but then you also realize that the whole of the body is just a collection of boundaries, because under the skin there is just another one. So it's not anymore the question of inside and outside. What is inside are the intestines, and what the outside is sort of the external world, but it's just more and more boundaries. So if you like, this is the simulacra approach to anatomy. Anatomical simulacra, or simulated anatomy.
Here it says that the whole body is actually a boundary.
The whole body is a boundary. Or the whole body is a simulacra. The body is a simulacra. Why? Because where I end, where is the end of me? Where is the end of my body? Well, when you ask it like that, then normally if you ask a tailor, then the answer will be, well, that's the end of your body. So if you're going to make me a jacket, you're probably going to end the sleeve here, well, not longer than that, yeah? Because beyond is not my body anymore. Correct? Okay, but if you ask an artist, if you ask a philosopher, not a tailor, where the body ends, think how it can be spread. Under the skin there is another layer, and you can spread that as well, and then another one, and there are kilometers of intestines, and each one of them can be spread, and each one has some layers of cover or some kind of, each one has its own skins. The liver has a skin of its own that can be taken and spread out, yeah? And each one of the cells has its own skin that can be taken and spread out. So once you start spreading all this body, once you start spreading all these layers of skin, you realize a few things. You realize that the body is nothing but skin. The body is nothing but borders and limits. But you also realize that the body is the question of the limit of the body is not that straightforward. The body doesn't just end up at your fingertips or at the ends of your mustache. It's just ephemeral and quite infinite. It's almost like, okay, I know that some of you might be sitting here and thinking, that is kind of all very well and quite clever perhaps, but how is it going to be useful? How is it going to be relevant? So Or maybe you're not thinking that. Maybe you're thinking something else. But see how what Lyotard is making us realize or proposing for us to consider is how the body is not autonomous thing that is separate, that has a clear border from the external world. And here is another way to think about it. Instead of the great ephemeral skin, read it in a slightly different way. This is my own interpretation. It's not Lyotard. Read it as the great ephemeral screen. The great ephemeral screen. Okay? So, sorry, I spelled it wrong. Sorry, again. The great ephemeral screen. Right? So here's the screen of my iPhone. Yeah? Now, where this screen actually ends, where are the boundaries of this screen? Where the Mona Lisa ends? Forget the Mona Lisa. Where are the edges of this screen? So on one hand, you might say, well, it's very clear the edges of the screen are marked by this white border. Yeah. Okay. But in some way, this screen also continues on that screen, and it also continues on all the other screens, because somehow, on some level, on some meaningful level, the same flow of data flows through all these screens. The same flow of algorithms and the same databases, the same search engines operate through all these screens, and in a sense they are all one big screen. Yeah? So it is kind of irrelevant that the screen really ends here physically, because this screen also continues on all the other screens. Does it make sense on some level? Yeah? So you see how the screen is both great and ephemeral. It is great because it's everywhere, and because there is a kind of, in a meaningful sense, this screen and a screen on someone's phone in China or in Algiers or in Timbuktu is the same screen. Yeah? And it's meaningful to say it. It's not just sort of a poetic metaphor. It is meaningful because they all, the same algorithms, the same databases, the same data flows through all of them. Yeah? So where the screen ends, it's kind of the wrong question. Yeah? It doesn't end because the screen, maybe what is more productive is to say there is only one screen. There is only one screen, and we take fragments or fractals of it with us in our pockets. And maybe that is the fractal program. Maybe the screen in your pocket is the fractal program. And yes.
Yeah, but I think it's a bit same as with the Mona Lisa. Without the idea of the Mona Lisa, there wouldn't be any copies. And it's the same with the screen, no? If there was no screen with the original, like something, we would have the...
But where is the original screen? Is there such a thing as the original? What happens? Is there such a thing as
the stay with the Mona Lisa? If there was no Mona Lisa print there wouldn't be these results on Google.
If there was no original Mona Lisa?
Yeah.
I think it would.
But let's say the original Mona Lisa now is disappeared, is gone. So we don't have the original Mona Lisa. Does it make any difference?
But once we had it.
Well, but let's say it's been annihilated. So you mean once we had, but do you think people will stop making their own versions of the Mona Lisa?
No, I mean there wouldn't be any Google results if there was no original Mona Lisa.
Okay.
So someone had to create something in this term Mona Lisa to be.
But something, so someone creates something all the time. Each one of the Mona Lisas is a creation. So of course, you're right. People have to make things. But what we are saying is that it's not about the original that later gets copied. It's just a production of differences. The one that Leonardo have made is just another one of all these Mona Lisas. There is no original. The Leonardo's one doesn't get a medal for being the first one.
I know, but has anyone painted this woman ever before?
We don't know. We don't know if he painted the woman. Maybe it was a self-portrait.
Yeah.
So maybe you see, we don't really need to. We don't need to give this Leonardo's painting a privileged position in relation to all the others. We can say it's just another version. It's just another instance, just another improvisation.
But if there were no like other versions, could we call it this only one as a version?
I don't understand. How do you mean?
If we didn't have any other copies to compare it, we couldn't say that it's just a version.
If we had no other copies, but we have. How could we have? How could it be possible not to have copies?
I'm pretty sure there are some paintings that no one ever copied yet.
And
so which one is the copy then?
so
if there is only one, then what is the copy?
well, if there is only one, then it is a series of one. Of course, yeah. Some things just don't proliferate, but it's still there is still a possibility of proliferation. There is still a possibility of infinite duplication. Yeah. So the model that you are talking about, the model in which there is the original and the copy, it is of course a valid model. There is a lot of things in our world that make sense based on this way of thinking. What we are discussing here is a different way of thinking. It doesn't make the original model, the original copy way of thinking invalid. It says there is another way to think about it. And in this way, there is no original and there is no copy. There is just a production of differences. Yeah? So it's not about having this first instance. See how it works with the screen. There is no first screen. All the screens are somehow connected. Yeah? Even though they are all separate, they're somehow also connected. Does it make perfect sense? No, it doesn't. But it makes some kind of sense. Yeah? Maybe it makes just enough sense to be able to make an artwork. Yeah? Maybe it makes just enough sense to start thinking about this contemporary situation, not in the way of original copy, but in a slightly more complex way that allows for a multiplicity. So here so let's go back to the question of the body. We have here the body being spread out and open. So what is it? So is there an original body? Lyotard, huh?
Are we using that rationale from the screen? Are we all fractals from the same world?
Are we, well, no, no. It's not so much about us being fractals, but it's more about breaking away from this way of thinking. This is me as a separate singular item, and this is you as a separate singular item. Because if Lyotard is right, and I am a collection of surfaces that has really no limits and no ends, because it can be spread more and more and more, then where my body really ends? Well, it kind of doesn't end anywhere. Where the Mona Lisa ends, if you look at all the Mona Lisas, where does it end? Can you So if you try to really delineate it, you will see it's a kind of, it's an infinite object. My body is also an infinite object. Where is the end of my body? Well, you might say, here I am, and this is you. But is it really the case? Don't we breathe the same air? Don't we share already some molecules and some viruses, God forbid, and some enzymes? And aren't we also sharing ideas? I'm contaminating your brain with some nonsense, and then it might affect you for a while, and then you might sort of shake your head and try to get it out, you know? Or you might actually, some of it might stay in your body and, you know, poison your thinking for a long time. Who knows, you know? Can you really say that this is me and this is you and there is a clear-cut border between us? I am the original, you are the copy? Well, Lyotard is saying that this is not so simple, especially not in the age of contemporary technology, that all operates on multiplications, reproduction, and continuous self-replication. So the body is a way into this libidinal economy, into this economy that operates according to the logic of desire, not to this rational logic. Now, can you continue this text? And this is not all.
And this is not all. Far from it. Connected onto these lips, a second mouth is necessary. A third, a greater number of other mouths, vulvas, nipples, and adjoining the skin of the fingertips, scraped by the nails, perhaps there should be huge silken beaches of skin, taken from the inside of the thighs, the base of the neck, or from the strings of a guitar.
What do you think that, sorry, how the guitar got into it? Why the guitar?
Because it shakes.
What guitar strings are made of?
I don't know.
It used to be cat intestines. And of course, still many electric guitars, many classical, but classical guitar had, now they have nylon strings, but in the past it would be animal intestines stretched. That would be the string, and you would play it with a horsehair bow in the violin. Yeah. So you see, the skin is not limited to the body. The musical instrument is also skin. So where the body ends, if it continues into the musical instrument. Okay, can you continue? And
against the palm, all latticed with nerves and creased like a yellowed leaf, set potter's clays, or even hard wooden handles encrusted with jewels, or a steering wheel, or a drifter's sail are perhaps required.
Because you see, the skin continues in the handle, in the potter's wheel, because something that you shape with your hands is also shaped by your skin. So the skin is not stopping in your hands. If you made a pot, let's say, on a potter's wheel, the pot takes something of your skin and keeps it and preserves it. Yes, don't forget to add.
Don't forget to add to the tongue and all the pieces of the vocal apparatus, or the sounds of which they are capable, and moreover the whole selected network of sounds that is the phonological system. For this too belongs to the libidinal body, like colours that must be added to retinas, like certain particles to the epidermis, like some particularly favoured smells to the nasal cavities, like preferred words and syntaxes to the mouths which utter them and to the hands which write them. It is not enough, you see, to say, like Belmer, that the fold in the armpit of the child dreamily intent, her elbow on the table and chin in her hand, could count as valoir pour, the folds of her groin, or even as the juncture of the lips of her sex. The question of counting as, don't urge us to ask it, far less to resolve it. It is not a part of the body. Of what body? The organic body, organized with survival as its goal, against what excites it to death, assured against riot and agitation, not a part which comes to be substituted for another part, like, for example, in the case of this little girl, the fleshiness of the arm for that of the thighs, and its faint fold for the vaginal slit. It is not this displacement of parts, recognizable in the organic body of political economy, itself initially assembled from differentiated and appropriated parts, the latter never being without the former, that we first need to consider.
Okay, stop here for a second. So what do you think he's talking about? Do you get any sense of it? Does it make you think of anything? Does it provoke you in any way?
I think that this could be a metaphor of a whole system. I mean, saying that the body and the skin is a system, and every aspect inside is. I mean, I think that Lyotard is trying to say that how to analyze every layer of something.
And what does it say about all these layers? What is the most important about all these layers? Yes?
The only one, skin. I mean,
Nilufer, that's kind of, I think, directly relates to your work, doesn't it?
In a way that each depends on each other.
Exactly. Can you repeat it?
Each one depends on the other.
Yeah. It's all interdependent. It's all connected. There is no inside and outside. What is, I think, came through very clearly in the way you installed your piece. You also spoke about it in your interview in the Take 5, how the sculpture doesn't really end anywhere in particular because it needs the building to support it. It continues in the structures of the building. It doesn't have any autonomous existence. In a sense, it is like the Mona Lisa. It just continues to reproduce itself. And once you meditate on this sculpture, you can keep seeing bits of it as you, say, walk around the King's Cross area in the buildings that are sort of mushrooming here, because the same material continues to reappear because you are using these roads from building sites. So then you encounter these roads somewhere else, they stop being just building site roads for you, they're also an artwork, they're also a sculpture. So the sculpture doesn't have any particular location. What you create is an intensive moment that allows us to reevaluate the whole of our visual field. And Lyotard is saying something similar about the body. And the body doesn't end anywhere in particular because there is nothing else. There is just the body. The body continues throughout. It's like the screen. Yeah? And it's also not a question of an original body because that kind of doesn't make any sense anymore. The notion of the original always depends on a clear boundary between the original and the copy. But what if there is no boundary? What if, or even better, what if there are only boundaries and there is nothing else but boundaries? So what does it mean to say that this is me and this is you? It becomes meaningless in the context of an infinite body, in the context of a body that doesn't end, in the context of an artwork that keeps reappearing at every building site, at every pile of metal, at every tree branch. So we kind of need to start thinking, this text says, in a different way to make sense of the contemporary condition, the modern condition, but also to make sense of contemporary art. What is disappearing is the notion of the inside and the outside. That there is me and there is you. There is original and there is copy. Instead, what we have is like this infinite repetition of the Mona Lisas. Yeah? This continuous, this rhythm of differences. Can you read to us from here? There is no need to begin with transgression.
There is no need to begin.
By the way, are you okay reading?
Yeah.
Yeah, you don't mind?
Yeah, if everyone can understand.
Yeah. Are you okay with Abbas reading? Yes.
That's great.
I think everyone is very happy.
There is no need to begin with transgression. We must go immediately to the very limits of cruelty, perform the dissection of polymorphous perversion, spread out the immense membrane of the libidinal body, which is quite different to a frame. It is made from the most heterogeneous textures, bone, epithelium, sheets to write on, charged atmospheres, swords, glass cases, peoples, grasses, canvases to paint.
Notice this. So the body, what is the body made of? The body is made of not only of bone, skin, epidermis, it's also made of sheets to write on, atmosphere, swords with which you kill or fight, glass cases which you find in a museum, peoples, grasses, canvases. All of this is the body. All of this is the skin. Yeah.
All these zones are joined end to end in a band which has no back to it. A Mobius band which interests us not because it is closed, but because it is one-sided. A Mobian skin which, rather than being smooth, is on the contrary, is this topologically possible, covered with roughness, corners, creases, cavities, which when it passes on the first term will be cavities, but perhaps on the second, lumps.
Okay, so do you remember Mobius band? What is the Mobius band? Yeah, so let me just remind it to you what it looks like. Anyone has a band? No.
Yes.
Too small.
Sorry.
That's fine, that's fine. So the Mobius band, great. Oh, that's perfect. That is so good. Can you pass it on? And I think that is great because that's exactly what that has to be a photographic film. So Mobius band is so okay. Think about it in this way. Let's say this is a 16 mm, but let's say just a photographic 35 mm film. Yeah. So do you know how film is constructed? On the one side you will have what?
Sensitive.
The sensitized surface. On the other, you will have, let's say, gelatin, or sort of the supporting emulsion. So one side is light sensitive, the other is not light sensitive. So you might say the film has a clear inside and outside. So you might say the light sensitive side is the skin of the film, yeah, facing the world. The plastic side is sort of the inside of the body, yeah. But then we do the Mobius thing, so we twist it and connect it like that, yeah. So now the emulsion is on this side, on the outside as it's supposed to be, but as we trace this emulsion, we suddenly find ourselves on the inside. So the emulsion now is both inside and outside. It becomes meaningless to ask what is outside and what is inside. We have a different topology here. We have a different logic. In this logic, in the logic of the Mobius band, there is no inside and outside. There is only one surface. One surface that's sometimes inside and sometimes outside. Yeah? So the whole, this is me, this is you, this is original, this is copy. Put original and copy on a Mobius band. You start with the original here. This is your Leonardo's painted Mona Lisa. And on the other side, all the copies. But you put, so that's the way we understand it like this. The original here, the copies here. Fine, that makes perfect sense. But then you put, you feed this into the Mobius band, and suddenly you start with the original, but imperceptibly the original becomes a copy. And as you follow the copy becomes the original. And it becomes meaningless to talk about the original and copy, because in the logic of the Mobius band, the logic dictates that the original will necessarily become a copy, the copy will necessarily become the original. It becomes meaningless to ask what came first, because they continuously produce each other. How is it possible? Didn't Leonardo come first? Yes, in the linear time of the straight film. But in the circular time of the Mobius band, it is circular because it continuously goes around and around and around. It's meaningless to ask what came first, because they continuously produce each other, just as in a fractal, it's meaningless to ask what came first, because the fractal continuously reproduces itself. So we are here dealing with a different logic. You might say, but isn't it a kind of invented, unreal logic? Well, first, it's not completely invented, because it's a very fundamental logic to the way things actually work. If you, for instance, I don't know if you did any kind of chemistry or physics in school, but have you studied the Brownian motion? Brownian motion. So Brownian motion is the motion of molecules of gas in a closed volume. So maybe something like that. I don't know if you'll be able to see.
In this lesson, we're going to have a look at the idea of Brownian motion.
So in Brownian motion, the molecules move in a completely random pattern. And because they move in a random pattern, it becomes meaningless to ask what came first and what came after, because there is no cause and effect. They just move completely randomly. And when something is random, then it suggests that it's not, the state of things now is not caused by the state of things before. So even to ask what came before and what came after becomes kind of meaningless. Yeah? Does it make sense? I know that it is hard to accept, because it's not how we normally taught to think. The whole point of today's session is to at least explore the potential possibility of thinking in a different way. Don't worry now about if this is the best way to think or the correct way. It's just possible. It's like learning to cycle on a monocycle. You know, have you ever tried a monocycle? You know what it is? Yeah? It's this kind of thing. Why would you do it if you have a perfectly good bicycle? You know, isn't it crazy? Yes, it is crazy. But just give it a go. It might be fun. Or you might also break your neck. You know? Or both. You know? It's just a different logic.
Would it be relevant to mention something like occasionalism at this point?
No. I tell you why. Not because you are wrong, but just because I think people are already exploding. So we're going to get to, think about your photographic film. I think it is really the best thing. And what happens if you load it into your camera, not like this, but like that, with this twist. So when the inside and the outside change, when suddenly it's not a question of the emulsion side or the plastic side. Yeah, it is only one side. There is no inside and outside. This is you and this is me, and we are completely separate. But in the Mobius band logic, we become each other. This is male and this is female. And in a traditional situation, they are completely separate. If male wants to become female, they have to go through the edge. The edge is sharp, the edge is dangerous. There might be a border police here. Yeah? So it's very difficult to change from male to female. But in the Mobius band environment, all you need to do is to keep going. And as you travel along the Mobius band, from being male, you become female, and from being female, you become male, and you keep moving without crossing any borders. Just by crawling along the band, you change shape, and you shift from being a good person to becoming an artist, and then a person again, and then again an artist. And so you see, and you might say, well, it's just a kind of optical illusion, or maybe it's a kind of a little philosophical joke, but it suggests that another way of thinking is possible. And perhaps this way of thinking can allow you to put things together in your art in a slightly different way. So what happens in a traditional, in a normal film situation, you will have art here and the real here. Art or original copy, art real, yeah? And this is the real world and this is the art world. And the two are completely separate. And in order to make art, you need to leave the real world, get into your studio, and then you make art. Yeah? Now you can see why the studio is such a good environment for making art, because it always implies this border. But here we have the Mobius band, and you start your day by going to the supermarket, by buying some groceries, and imperceptibly, this is already art. This is like Andrea Fraser lecture we saw earlier in the beginning of this session. It begins as a thank you and welcome and thank you for inviting me, and before you know it, this thank you becomes an artwork.
So that's also a paradox.
Yes, it is a paradox, but it shows you how the paradox actually works. But how you can use the energy of the paradox in your practice. So what Andrea Fraser is doing is precisely obliterating the edge between the artwork and the real. How the real and the artwork relate to each other? They continuously change into each other. They continuously produce each other. So, Nilufer, you could say that your work operates on a Mobius band like this. Because instead of being an artwork that reflects on the real, it explores its intricate relations with the real. Right? You might say that this is the representational model, image, real, and this is the simulacra model, in which the image and the real belong to the same logic. They continuously produce each other. Okay? So, this is complex stuff, guys. This really is difficult, but I think also quite relevant. And I think somehow it's easier for us to grasp it because we live in this Mobius band environment. How do you make sense of the fact that sometimes you are in this physical world and sometimes you are in a virtual world? Sometimes you spend hours online and sometimes you spend time offline. So are these two separate worlds, or they continuously produce each other? So maybe you are already crawling on this Mobius band, constantly changing, not only from inside to outside, but from offline and online, from art and the real, from male and female, from being a human being and being an artist. All these things are continuously producing each other. So, how far did we get? Mobius, can you start from here?
Yes. Mobius band, which interests us not because it is closed, but because it is one-sided. A Mobian skin which rather than being smooth is on the contrary, is this topologically possible, covered with roughness, corners, creases, cavities, which when it passes on the first turn will be cavities, but perhaps on the second, lumps. But as for what turn the band is on, no one knows, nor will know, in the eternal turn. The interminable band with variable geometry, for nothing requires that an excavation remain concave. Besides, it is inevitably convex on the second turn, provided it lasts, has not got two sides, but only one, and therefore neither exterior nor interior.
Okay, so you see, in the logic of the Mobius band, your body doesn't have an exterior and interior. So there is nothing that is really outside of you. Things that happen in Africa or in Belgium affect you just as directly as something that you ate for breakfast. Why? Because this is the condition of modernity. This is the condition of the interconnected world. That's what it means to be plugged into a network. Where the network ends, does it end here? Is it everywhere? Well, if it is everywhere, then where are the limits of your body? Do you see how this thinking really propels you or provokes you to rethink your artwork, not as having some kind of independent, autonomous existence, but as something to do with connectedness, with networkedness, yeah? With the way things change shape and become something else. That's why they're ephemeral, but also great at the same time. Why great? Because universal, because it's everywhere. Why ephemeral? Because it's not something you can actually hold on to, because you're still you, and you still put clothes on your body, and that is absolutely true. That is, you know, you don't need to dress another person, even though your body doesn't end where you think it does. So that is the paradox of the body. And you know, last year I did a series of lectures for the MA fashion students, and the first session I had with them, in the first session I told them, tell me where the body ends, because if you're going to make clothes for bodies, it's helpful to know where is it. And then we looked at the aircraft, and they realized that they don't need to make clothes that cover a body. They can make clothes that are infinite, that are dragging on and on. And then if you look at someone like, for instance, Comme des Garçons. Do you know Comme des Garçons? Which is my favorite fashion label. You see how this way of thinking can actually help you to design, to work as a designer. Yeah, this is exactly what a body that doesn't have limits looks like. Does it make sense? Yeah. And now, maybe you could also arrive at something like this without reading Lyotard. At the same time, you see how this kind of philosophy we are reading here can be really helpful in making work. So is this a dress? Is this a letter shape? Is this a musical instrument, a quilt, a pillow, a cushion, a protective armor? It's all these things. Yeah? And at the same time, it's also covering a physical body. That is still there. But it is also a Mobius band that is continuously reproducing itself. Yeah? So, you don't arrive at that just by thinking, how can I make a jacket a little bit more interesting? You need to start from that end. You need to start from asking, where are the limits of the body? And there is a line of in Comme des Garçons, which is all about dress machine. I probably will not find it now, but some of you might be able to find it later. This is also very nice. So is it a corset? Is it a prism? Is it a skeleton? Is the skeleton that you wear on the outside of your body instead of the inside? So where is the inside and where is the outside? It all seems to be in flux. Yeah? Again, you can probably say, well, someone just wanted to be original and clever and came up with this. Maybe. But there is a logic to this. What kind of logic? Libidinal logic. Yeah? This is exactly the logic of desire, the libidinal economy. And of course, fashion is economy. Yeah? And Comme des Garçons is not only making this wacky design, it's also incredibly commercially successful. But perhaps this commercial success is connected to understanding how desire operates. Yeah? Now I know that some of you here are working as fashion photographers. Yeah, and that's how many of our students make a living. Again, I think that understanding what Lyotard has to say about the body can make you a better fashion photographer. It can allow you to understand the fashion object in a more dramatic way, in a more sophisticated way. Okay, so Abbas, am I exploiting you?
No. Very happy to be exploited.
Okay.
Where should I start?
Do you have any questions? Are things getting a little? Do you start to understand how simulacra works, and how simulacra is the libidinal band, and how the libido and economy and simulacra, they all kind of belong to the same sphere that somehow touches upon your practice? Do you start to get these feelings in your body? Whatever that means. Good. Yeah. Right.
Okay. It is certainly not a libidinal theatre then. No density, intensities running here and there, setting up, escaping, without ever being imprisoned in the volume of the stage/auditorium. Theatricality and representation, far from having to be taken as libidinal givens, a fortiori metaphysical result from a certain labour on the labyrinthine and Mobian band, a labour which prints these particular folds and twists, the effect of which is a box closed upon itself, filtering impulses and allowing only those to appear on the stage which come from what will come to be known as the exterior, satisfying the conditions of interiority. The representative chamber is an energetic dispositif. To describe it and to follow its functioning, that's what needs to be done. No need to do a critique of metaphysics or of political economy, which is the same thing, since critique presupposes and ceaselessly creates this very theatricality. Rather, be inside and forget it. That's the position of the death drive. Describe these foldings and gluings, these energetic vections that establish the theatrical cube with its 6 homogeneous faces on the unique and heterogeneous surface.
Stop here. Okay, so does it make any sense at all? No? That's okay, you can say it doesn't make any sense at all. Okay, now we're going to try to make some sense of it, but for that I need to have a double screen. It's an experiment. We'll see if it will work. So first, can you read it? Oops. Can you read it like this, or is it too small? Is it too small? When it's half a screen? Or can you still read it? Okay, because here, on this side, you need to have a video. I want to examine with you. And that will be, this will be again, This is America by Gambino. By the way, do you know that there is, have you been watching Atlanta? Yeah? It's on BBC now, I think. It's the same creator, Donald Glover. I think Atlanta is fantastic. It's like a cross between Seinfeld and Twin Peaks. I think I mentioned it to you a couple of weeks ago. It's really worth your while watching it. It's fantastic. Okay, now, so what I want to try to do is to read this section in Lyotard in a libidinal band, in a sort of Mobius band relation to the oh, no, that's wrong. That was wrong. But is it possible to make it just to fill this part of the screen? No.
Apple has something.
Oh, just to enlarge it like this.
Yeah.
Okay, great. Right. So it's not perfect because it would be nicer to have to see both bigger. But I want to show you how we can read this together, or as a sort of Mobius band, when the text produces the image and the image produces the text, and in that way to start to understand. So okay, and I will take the sound off for now, just so we can hear the text. But it would be an interesting project to perhaps combine them really, like combine them into one object. So what I would like to ask you is to read the first sentence, perhaps, while we play the opening scene of this film. Are you ready? Okay, let's go.
Did you read it to ourselves?
No. You read it aloud. Yeah. You read it aloud, and we try to watch it and listen at the same time. Yeah? Okay, let's do it. Let's try.
Theatricality and representation, far from having to be taken as libidinal givens, a fortiori metaphysical result from a certain labour on the labyrinthine and Mobian band, a labour which prints these particular folds and twists, the effects of which is a box closed upon itself, filtering impulses and allowing only those to appear on the stage which come from what will come to be known as the exterior, satisfying the conditions of interiority.
Okay, stop here. So that was a long sentence. Theatricality and representation. Now, do you see theatricality and representation in this video? Where do you see theatricality and representation?
The way he moves, it's sort of
it's very exaggerated, isn't it? Like, look at that. Yeah. So there is moving, and there is moving in a way that makes you really think about moving. Yeah. So there is looking, and there is looking that really shows you the white of the eye, which is just looking about looking. Yeah. So this exaggerated theatricality. Yeah. So what Lyotard is saying, this theatricality, this representation, don't think about it as libidinal given. What is libidinal? Is desire. It's not, don't understand it simply as an expression of desire. There is something else there. It's not just to draw you in. Yeah, it's not just about performance.
Can you say again, what is not literal given?
Theatricality and representation. Yeah, far from having to be taken as libidinal givens. Yeah? What are libidinal givens? A fortiori metaphysical. What is metaphysical? Metaphysical is something that pertains to truth. Yeah, just to keep things simple for now. Metaphysical, something that relates to the notion of truth, to common sense, to what is right. So don't look at representation simply in terms of theatricality, simply in terms of representing something. Don't look at Childish Gambino here simply representing, for instance, some kind of idea of blackness, or idea of entertainment, or idea of desire. Rather, understand it as a certain labor on the labyrinthine and Moebian band. Now, Mobius band is the band that has no inside and outside. So he says, instead of looking at Childish Gambino as representing, let's say, blackness or violence or exploitation or entertainment, think about what he's doing as part of the Mobius band, which means something that is both an image and the real thing that constantly produce each other. What does it, what might it mean in the context of this video? So this video is called This is America. Yeah? Now, This is America in the traditional Mona Lisa understanding. Yeah? This is Mona Lisa. What does it mean? It means this is the Mona Lisa. This is the imitation. This is the copy. Yeah? So you take, let's say, visitors to the Louvre, and you say, well, this is the Mona Lisa. That's what you paid to see. This is a copy. This is a cheap imitation. Don't worry about that. That's a postcard from the shop. Yeah? Original copy. Yeah? So that is the representation. Now, if you plug this into the libidinal band, into the Mobius band, then what we are getting, that this is America can mean two things. This is America. This is Mona Lisa. It also can mean this is America. What you see in the video, this is America. You watching it right now, this is America. America is not over there represented in this video. America is you watching this video. This is America. Do you understand? Do you see the two, how the same expression, this is America, can come to you in these two dimensions, and both are valid. This is America. I'm telling you a story about America. I'm giving you a theatrical representation. Theatricality representation, far from having to be taken as libidinal givens, a fortiori metaphysical, result from a certain labor on the labyrinthine and Moebian band. So, This is America is not only pointing to, I'm not only telling you the state, this is the state of America. This is the video that you are now watching, and you watching, this is America. Does it make sense? Okay? So, and what does it mean? It means that Gambino operates in two registers at once. On one level, I'm going to I'm making a video about violence and what it's like to be a black person in America. So by looking at it, you see a picture, a representation of what it's like to be black. So it will have violence, it will have shootings, it will have police cars, it will have prisons, it will have all the things you expect to see when I say I'm going to tell you a story about being black in America. But there is another story I'm telling you. And this is the story of you watching this thing right now. You watching it, you being absorbed in your screen, in this great ephemeral screen, you being sucked into YouTube as one of the, oh, no, sorry. There we go. As one of the, how many views it had? 1 second. 200, it's impossible to pronounce, 210 million views. Now, maybe what Gambino is telling us, what Clover is telling us is, this is America. The America is not what you see in the video. The America is that 210 million people, 210,950,173, obviously 174 now, yeah? 211 million people watch this video. This is America. So America is not what is represented in the film, in the clip. America is the condition of 210 million watching the same thing, which is completely unheard of. Is it insignificant? Well,
it's comparable to the population of America.
The whole point is that it's not insignificant. Yeah, the question of who is the original Mona Lisa becomes irrelevant when you have 210 million versions of the Mona Lisa. Yeah, clinging to the notion, yes, but there is an original somewhere, we just need to go and get hold of it and then we will be saved. Doesn't work anymore. There is a new logic, and this logic is to do with how can something be viewed by 210 million people. So in some way, Donald Glover contaminated the brains of 210 million people with some kind of virus. So he changed the code in 210 million brains in a certain way. Now if he can do it, also that's exactly what Trump is doing with his tweets. This is America. America is not what you see in the movie. America is you watching this movie. You watching it as part of 210 million, as this one massive libidinal body, and responding to it. This is America. Yeah? It's this colossal body that all feeds from the same internet source. That's why I told you, how can we talk about this screen ending here if I watch it as part of 210 million? So the screen is in 210 million places at once. Yeah, that's why it is also the great ephemeral screen. So, do you see it how? Do you see now what Lyotard is talking about? He is saying, don't look at this piece in terms of what it represents, or not only, at least don't look at it only as what it represents. Also consider that it's a result of a certain labor. What labor? Well, it's the technology that makes 200 million views possible. Yeah, it's a very different technology from oil painting or photography or, you know, everything we knew until now. There is something completely different around. And this labor on the labyrinthine and Moebian band, a labor which prints these particular folds and twists, the effect of which is a box closed upon itself, the black box, yeah? Filtering impulses, and allowing only those to appear on the stage which come from what will come to be known as the exterior, satisfying the conditions of interiority. The exterior and the interior are completely twisted. Of course, the content of this video and what it represents is important. That is, if you like, the exterior or the interior. But there are also 210 million views. And that is, you might say, the exterior to the image. Maybe that is not nothing to do with the image, but they produce each other. All these views produce the video, and this video produces the views. If it was a different video, if it was a video of a person dressed as a chicken, maybe it wouldn't have 210 million views. So what we see is important, but it's not the whole story. It's also important that it is seen by this unimaginable number of people. And then you realize that's how contemporary politics is happening. That's why, for instance, Cambridge Analytica or all these sort of schemes to manipulate public opinion are so effective, because in one little video you can reach 210 million people. Now, if you can do it with a pop video, you can also do it with a racist tweet. And if you can do it with a racist tweet, then we can turn a whole country into a racist environment. Yeah, this is what's happening. This is America. Do you understand? Yeah? And do you see how the Mobius band operates between the inside and the outside? The number of views and the content are co-producing each other. Okay, now the next sentence, the representative chamber.
The representative chamber is an energetic dispositif.
Sorry, we're going to run it, and you're going to read it.
Where is it?
The representative chamber.
Oh, yeah. The representative chamber is an energetic dispositif.
What is a dispositif?
Some kind of, it's hard to explain, but it's like a device.
It's a machine.
Yeah.
It's a device. It's an apparatus. It's a camera. Think about a photographic camera. A photographic camera is also a libidinal object. It's an energetic dispositif. So the representative chamber, which is, let's say, this hangar, this warehouse where the filming is taking place, it's not only a stage, it's also an energetic machine. It's a machine that produces energies. It's a machine that produces desires. Yeah? Think about Donald Trump's tweets. He sends about 10 or 12 of them in the morning and 10 or 12 of them in the evening. So twice a day, the 200 million people who subscribe to his feed get this sort of coded message right into their heads, through the eyes. And this coded message is working. One night, it's working because it has a way to manipulate the libido. It has a way to manipulate desire. It is an energetic dispositif. And on some level, they are just kind of meaningless, badly written, textual exercises. But if you just look at, let's say, and I'm using Donald Trump tweets here as just one example, but you could look at any form of media, and I think that's what Clover is telling us. He says, yes, well, I made a video against violence and racism, but I could also make a video for violence and racism. It will also have 2,000 million views, and then what? So this is America, right? So the representative chamber.
The representative chamber is an energetic dispositif. To describe it and to follow its functioning, that's what needs to be done. No need to do a critique of metaphysics or political economy, which is the same thing, since critique presupposes and ceaselessly creates this.
Read it again. No need to
do a critique of metaphysics or of political economy, which is the same thing, since critique presupposes and ceaselessly creates this very theatricality.
So what does it mean? What does it mean in relation to this video? What does it mean that it kind of suggests you don't need to analyze this video for its content. So yes, there was a scene we just saw with shooting a person, and then the gun is kind of taken away very carefully, wrapped in a cloth. Did you see that? So it kind of says, yes, you could analyze it as an image in terms of what it signifies, and many people wrote about it, how the gun is sort of taken away with so much care, wrapped in a cloth, but the person was just kind of left lying there. So you could analyze that, but Leonard is saying you don't need to do a critique of metaphysics. You don't need to analyze it in terms of content or meaning, or of political economy, which is the same thing. You don't need to read it in terms of representation or comment on American politics, because critique presupposes and ceaselessly creates this very theatricality. Because to critique something is to immediately take a rational position towards it. But what we are dealing with is not rational. That's precisely the point of 210 million views. It's something that is beyond rationality. It's something that is beyond the inside and outside logic. No need to do a critique of metaphysics or of political economy, which is the same thing, since critique presupposes and ceaselessly creates this very theatricality. Can you continue, please? Thank you.
Rather be inside and forget it. That's the position of the depth drive. Describe these foldings and gluings, these energetic vections that establish the theatrical cube with its 6 homogeneous faces on the unique and heterogeneous surface.
So it kind of says, instead of analyzing this video for all its kind of signifying elements, instead be inside and forget it. Immerse yourself in it. Allow yourself to be swallowed by it. And then describe what it's like to be swallowed by it. What it's like to be drawn in. What it's like to be one of 2010 million. Describe its foldings and gluings. So instead of analyzing it in terms of its meaning, describe how it is constructed. What does it mean to make something that gets distributed on a platform like YouTube or Twitter? What does it mean to make something that gets fed into millions of people simultaneously? Describe this rather than what an individual tweet or an individual scene means. Describe the mechanics of production, which is very similar to what Flusser is saying. Describe the mechanics of production rather than the meaning of the image. These energetic vections that establish the theatrical cube with its 6 homogeneous faces on the unique and heterogeneous surface. And then it keeps on to go from the pulsion or desire to representation, but without allowing oneself, in order to describe this implementation, this sedentarization of the influxes, without allowing oneself the suspect facility of luck, the trick facility of an empty alterity, of a zero. What is being said here is how to describe what is going on without being drawn into image origin, subject and object, concept and thing. How to describe something in terms of its energies and not in terms of what it represents. Yeah? So going back, for instance, to something like the Mona Lisa, because we need to look at this again. It might mean how to describe this, not in terms of what each one of these images represent, but in terms of the energy that makes this possible. But if you start describing it in terms of the energy that makes this possible, then you might mention that there is an original, but you also need to somehow account for the technologies and the processes and the desires that make people want to participate in producing all these versions. Yeah? So that's what be inside and forget it might mean. Any questions? What do you think? Was it a good match between Gambino and Lyotard? It was, huh? It's interesting, huh? I only noticed it last week because I was reading this Lyotard with my PhD methodologies class. And I thought this is shockingly accurate. He says, describe these foldings and gluings, these energetic vections that establish the theatrical cube. So if you really want to analyze this video, he says, you don't need a frame-by-frame analysis of all the scenes and what they mean and how they relate to Black Lives Matter and violence in prisons. All of this is true, but if you just do that, you kind of miss the point. What you really need to understand is how come, what makes it possible for 210 million people to share the same object and become part of it and contribute to it, and how these algorithms have so much power over our lives. Once you start looking into that, you don't focus on the surface of the image, but on the way its production is actually a completely misunderstood and massive political force. then you really get to think about the role of repetition and duplication and production in your own practice. Good. That's it.